How are we supposed to help people that don't even know how to trust their hunger anymore because they're always hungry and they're never full, and then they're eating all the time? So, me and you both know their blood sugar probably looks like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it really directly correlates with our ability to understand our hunger signals.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Today we have a part 2 of an amazing interview that I did with my good friend Jennilyn Griffiths, who is a guru on gut health and all things gut and bacterial balance and microbes and all these amazing things. And we are looking at how our gut is tied to our blood sugar and metabolic health. We're going to go really deep into this part of the interview. We're also going to talk about some other things that are cool. So the importance of butyrate and how to naturally produce more of it. We're going to talk about which microbiome testing is going to be the best for your gut that actually shows why you have an overgrowth. So Jennilyn was telling me when we met in person, she was showing me this gut test that she was using, and I was like, oh my God, I like that better than the one that I'm using. So it was super, super cool to see her results. And so we talk about that awesome testing that you can get. We talk about why having low stomach acid has become an epidemic and not high stomach acid. Most people think I have heartburn, I have too much acid. It's actually most likely the opposite of that. It's too little stomach acid. And stomach acid, I will tell you, is the linchpin of the digestive tract. It's something that you need to get right, and you have to have it dialed in order for every step of digestion below that step to be triggered in the right way. So super, super important and something you really want to get right. We're going to talk about 5 best practices of how to restore your microbiome. So we're going to get actionable tips here. And then we're also going to talk about some different thoughts on fermented foods for gut health, which are good, which are bad, which are a waste of time, and who should actually eat them. And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not the more fermented foods, the better for everybody. We can't use that as a blanket statement. So we're going to talk about some nuances there. So this part 2 of this interview is amazing. I can't wait to dive in. And before we do that, I just want to tell you about my sponsor for today's episode. Good Idea. Good Idea is that blood sugar stabilizing sparkling water. If you drink 1/3 of a can before the meal and the second and third of the can, the rest of the can with the rest of the meal, you get a 20 to 30% reduction in your blood sugar spike from that meal. And that is so, so important. Good Idea is an amazing, simple tool that you can add. Of course, I don't do this every single meal, but I do it on occasions if I'm going to add carbs, if I'm doing a carb up, going to a picnic or a barbecue or a get together where I don't have control of the menu. You can go to goodidea.us or just click the link below this video. Use the code DannyHealth to get 10% off your first order. All right, well, I will see you soon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this interview with Jennilyn Griffiths. I really wanted to talk about how leaky gut that we were talking about earlier, how it is really tied to our blood sugar and metabolic health. So is there anything specific that you can point us to besides, some of the basics that like our gut is related to everything? Like, yeah.
No, it is very specific to blood sugar. I'll tell you why. So if you have leaky gut, one thing that we know in research is that, so you have ghrelin and leptin. I'm sure people, if they've been listening to you, they're probably familiar. So ghrelin is what makes you hungry. I usually like to say ghrelin, growling stomach. Mm-hmm. Like that's how I like remember it, right? And then leptin, I don't really have a thing for. So ghrelin makes you hungry and leptin makes you know that you're full. So, right. So these work in opposition to each other. Like it builds up. I get hungry. Ghrelin's up there. I eat a meal. And then ghrelin is supposed to go down and leptin is supposed to come up. Right. So then I'm supposed to get, I've had enough food. So I stop eating. I'm not hungry anymore. And then I get really satiated. That's what should happen in an adult that doesn't have leaky gut. Okay. Yeah. Now, in an adult that has leaky gut, not an adult, anyone, kid too, that actually does not happen. So they've seen in research, ghrelin will go up, they eat, and it barely goes down. It barely even changes.
Wow.
And then worse is that leptin actually does not come up either. So there's a term, actually, leptin resistance, that people should look into. Dr. Jack Kruse. He also has like the leptin reset. I think he's
Kleiner.
Totally accurate.
Yeah, Sarah Kleiner has stuff as well, especially for females. Her stuff is
really
her stuff is, it's more, she took a lot of information from Dr. Jack Kruse and femalified it, I like to call it. So she takes more into account hormones and things like, because he'll say like, take ice baths every day. And it's like, whoa, we have a menstrual cycle. So his stuff is amazing for sure. But Sarah's is great as well. Yeah. multiple sources.
No, I love
of
that.
good
But like, yeah,
information.
so think about this, guys, if you're leptin resistant, if you're not getting the leptin response that you're satiated, and then you're also not getting ghrelin, the hunger hormone, to go down after you eat, can you see how this is setting you up for a blood sugar disaster?
Yes.
Like it really is. It's like
Yes.
this is why I'm so big on leaky gut, is I'm like, how are we supposed to help people that don't even know how to trust their hunger anymore because they're always hungry and they're never full, and then they're eating all the time. So me and you both know their blood sugar probably looks like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like it really directly correlates with our ability to understand our hunger signals, and then also huge on blood sugar. So like one thing, for instance, is when we have leaky gut, we typically see a decline in the microbiome diversity. So we have less species, okay, because of all the inflammation, the ones getting killed off. A lot of those species produce what's called short chain fatty acids. So they eat fiber and then they make short chain fatty acids. Butyrate being the biggest one, right? Butyrate has actually been shown to help regulate blood sugar just in itself, just butyrate. So then it's funny because people are like, oh, let's just supplement butyrate. I'm like, no, just eat freaking fiber so your body can make it. Like it's not, you know what I mean? Like, anyway, so these short chain fatty acids, there's butyrate, acetate, propionate. They actually, all three of them help with blood sugar regulation, but particularly butyrate. So that in particular right there, like if I do the microbiome test, we can actually assess if people are making a lot of butyrate depending on if they have the butyrate producers, of microbiome. And I see on a lot of tests, people have low butyrate. So that means that they're probably they're not regulating blood sugar well. B, their butyrate actually has effects on the brain as well. So they're probably suffering with some brain issues. Like they're pretty big. So like I would say leaky gut, it's multifaceted for how it affects blood sugar. But one thing I will say too, we know that LPS can mess with blood sugar. And you said that earlier too, right? So when you have leaky gut, we can measure it by the amount of LPS that people have after a meal. And like I said, that LPS is like elevated for 5 hours. So think about how that would affect your blood sugar, a huge amount of LPS. It would typically cause a lot of people, when they get that stress response, they want sugar. That's that's how we calm ourselves, right? Yeah. So then it's going to make you more likely to reach for refined carbohydrates and high sugar stuff, which is going to send you on that roller coaster. So it's just like a whole package, right? It's like if you have leaky gut, you won't know when you're hungry. You won't know when you're not full. You're always hungry, and then your hunger doesn't really go down. So then you're forced to eat more often because you think you're hungry. It's like when people like fix their leaky gut and blood sugar, like me and you can probably eat a meal and we could be good for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. Like it's like, yeah, we could eat, but we're not like going to die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the hard part with leaky gut is people do not have the same response. Their hunger hormones are totally messed up. We've also seen it can affect, I think it's called PYY or PPY. Do you know what I'm talking about? The peptide in your gut?
I think I've heard of it.
Anyway,
I think it's
PPY or PYY.
I think I've heard of it. Or
PYY.
I'm thinking of PQQ. I don't know.
Anyway, there's all these things. But it affects a lot of different satiation hormones and pretty much all the signals that your body is full. Yeah. And then it's funny because like we talk about, I mean, me and you, like we love Molly and how passionate she is about circadian health. But honestly, I am too. Like the more I study about the gut, it really does follow circadian rhythm. So I do believe a lot of people's gut issues could be due to eating at the wrong time, sleeping at the wrong time, like the things we know that influence your circadian rhythm. And it's like, and that's going to affect blood sugar too.
Yeah.
So it's like circadian biology, blood sugar, and microbiome, they're all pretty closely related, to be honest.
Yeah, they are absolutely. And as you were talking, and saying just how important it is to heal the gut and to have a good diversity of bacteria in the gut. And for me, I like to really focus on how we break down our food because that was such a missing component before the food gets to the gut. If it's not broken down by the proper stomach acid and digestive enzymes and bile and chewed thoroughly, then it's going to be this hunk of food and your small intestine is going to be like, what the F is this? Like, I don't know what to do with this. Yes. It's like I was expecting an amino acid and a B vitamin and you're giving me a hunk of steak. So that's very inflammatory for it too and can drive the shaving down of those little villi, which are like those finger-like, hairy finger-like projections with all the surface area. So it could shave those down, drive more leaky gut, drive food intolerances. So it is so connected, and that's why in my program, Blood Sugar Mastery, digestion module is module number 2, because we have to work on digestion and gut health because it's so connected. It's such a root cause, just like blood sugar is a root cause too for so many things, and circadian health. So we're talking about these big pieces in the foundation of our health that we really need to dial in, and they're all so interconnected. We can't, just like Western medicine separates out like, a GI doctor and an ENT and a whatever, like we can't really separate these things out because there's so much overlap, right? And
yes.
So this is why I'm making my program Optimize Your Digestion for Low Carb Diets, because so much of what you talked about, Jennilyn, is going to be in that program. And then I also have people who are wanting to get tested. I have you listed as the referral, because sometimes tell us why we might need to get testing. Like, what will the testing show us? Because you were talking about your testing. I'm like, I want to get that testing. And like what you're learning about it sounds so cool.
It is. No, thank you. I appreciate like everything you just said. I appreciate you're also creating a course, because I do think a lot of people benefit from keto, like we said, but they're not digesting fats well. So that's a big, thank you for doing that. I'm just like, the world needs this so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
But yeah, so the main test I use is a genetic microbiome stool test. Okay. So it's with Microbiome Labs. The reason I like it so much is some tests will show you. So whenever people think about testing, they are like, who's the bad guy, right? And I used to think that way too. I used to be like, oh, am I positive for this? Do I have candida? Do I have this, right? But I think a big piece of what people don't understand is, why do you have the bad guy, right? Yeah. Why did he overgrow? What in your environment allowed that pathogen to get so crazy? Because our body, nature doesn't make mistakes, okay? Like nature, you don't just randomly get a crazy overgrowth. I don't believe that anymore. Yeah. Okay. So what this test shows that's so important is, why did you get an overgrowth? So we've learned in the microbiome world that it's an ecosystem, and the ecosystem likes balance, right? So if I start missing a lot of good guys, there's what's called keystone species. There's like 12 of them. We know them to be very critically important for every person for like a number of different reasons. These are like your knights, okay? If you have soldiers, these are like your knights. You're 12 dudes that are like really important and you don't want to miss them. So this microbiome stool test, what I've seen, I've done like over 30 of these, by the way, in the last like few months. Like I really am into this. I've been studying it for the last 10. Please. Yeah, I've been studying it for 10 months. I see patterns. I'm obsessed. Yeah. But what I've been seeing, a lot of people are missing keystone species, like a lot of them.
Wow.
So you can already tell the compensations that start to happen in the gut, right? So it's like, the reason I like this stool test is you don't see just who's there, you see who's not there, right? So if I see who's not there, if I see, oh, Danielle, you're missing these really important guys that have important jobs, I can give you guidance on how to build back those species.
Can you give an example?
Yes. Okay. So Akkermansia muciniphila, that's a very important strain. It's known to help with the tight junctions. It's known to help with blood sugar. It's known to help with immune modulatory effects. A lot of people are missing it. If they're missing it, we know that polyphenols can build back Akkermansia. Cool. So polyphenols, rich polyphenols like citrus polyphenols, blueberries, blackberries, cacao, like all these different polyphenols can feed Akkermansia. So and also pomegranate seeds. Like there's just certain foods you can know that species likes those fibers. So then you can kind of tailor it towards, oh, cool, I'm going to add some diversity of fibers to build back these good guys that I'm missing.
Love
right?
that. My Akkermansia on a test was high.
So that can actually be an indicator of excessive mucus production, because it's a mucus producer. Excessive mucus production may be due to inflammation. So you're responding to your environment is like compensated because of inflammation, right? Yeah. So we see a lot of, like, now I'm so deep into it that I see all these, like I said, compensations, right? So you see so you mentioned stomach acid. Yeah. Let's go there for a second. If someone is low in stomach acid, that's supposed to be a very acidic environment, right? It should be on a scale. If you know the pH scale, 0 being acidic, 14 being alkaline, your stomach should be like 1.5 to 3.5, like very acidic. Okay. Most people don't have enough stomach acid. Me and Danielle know this. It's like an epidemic. Like people do not have enough stomach acid, like ever. When you don't have enough stomach acid, that means that it doesn't get very acidic in your stomach, right? The pH is too high. So then your body has to compensate later for the lack of pH. So your microbiome will start to shift. So there's a ratio called the FB ratio in the microbiome world. It's Firmicutes to Bacteroides ratio, okay? What I see on test is people, when they don't have enough stomach acid, they start to shift to higher Firmicutes because they can make it more acidic later in your digestive tract because it missed being acidic in your stomach.
Mine was shifted, my ratio. I did a different gut test, and this was like over a year ago, but that makes sense because I still have the suppressed stomach acid, and then my ratio was
your Firmicutes high?
I believe so. Like whatever the one that makes it,
Firmicutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when Firmicutes goes high, guess what else happens? It's harder to lose weight.
We talked about
because
this
Firmicutes are more efficient at extracting calories out of food. So it's like people don't understand by just having low stomach acid, you're shifting your whole microbiome environment to where you can make yourself a little bit more likely to have insulin resistance and weight gain. Just by shifting that. So if I see that, like I said, I look for patterns on the test now, right? I see, okay, is this ratio off? For instance, that's a ratio I see off a lot. And usually when I see it, they are struggling to lose weight, to be honest. But like I said, it has to do with your body is compensating because it's like, yo, if you're not acidic over here, I have to break it down in order before I get all the way to the colon. So it has to have microbiome that will make it more acidic environment. But that shouldn't have to happen, right? If we had the proper acid in place, all those compensations wouldn't take place. And also, just so people know, if they don't have enough stomach acid, you're way more likely to develop SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which that in itself just throws everything off. Like SIBO is just, and I can see on these microbiome tests, I like to see because there's common, for instance, SIBO is usually caused by a bacteria called Klebsiella and E. coli. Those are really common culprits in SIBO. So if I see those elevated, I already know there's a SIBO picture probably before they even do a breath test, right? They could confirm with a breath test, but like I can see a lot of patterns where I'm like, dude, you got SIBO. Like it's all over your test.
So which ones were that? Klebsiella and
E. coli.
Interesting.
And then any like proteobacteria. So if they have proteobacteria that are elevated, that's a species of bacteria that are associated with SIBO and inflammation in general. The other reason I like this test, and I'm not trying to like scare people, but it is a genetic stool test. So I can see if you are predispositioned to, so there's different bacteria that when they get elevated are associated with different disease. Yeah. So for instance, Fusobacteria is associated with colon cancer. Okay. So if I see that super elevated in someone, I would honestly probably have them go get a colonoscopy and start some aggressive treatments so they don't get colon cancer. I'm not saying it's like, again, it's not, I can't do the test and say you got cancer, dude, but like I can say, you have this elevated species that's very correlated with colon cancer, and you should probably look into this. And I did one on
mine was.
A lady in yours was? Yeah, Fusobacteria. Mm-hmm. Also, there's one called Synergistes, and that one's associated with periodontal disease. And every time that I've gotten it, I tell them this is associated with periodontal disease, and they said, yeah, my dentist says I have that. Every single time.
Wow.
So it's pretty accurate. Like once you start, again, it is a lot to learn. That's why when you ask me, I'm like, I've honestly spent 10 months learning this shit. But like, I'm all, if you want to go in, girl, go in. It's a rabbit hole.
Well, I've learned some, and I've learned a lot from my program. I did the restorative wellness program, and we use the GI map. And so I'm referring to when I say I tested and when like this was high in me, I used a GI map. And I do like the GI map, but I like the test that you're talking about way better just because it gives a lot more information, I feel like. But it's, the way that I was taught to eliminate it was like eliminate the pathogen and, do these like killing stuff and
antimicrobials all the time.
Yeah.
I think there's a better way.
Yeah. And what you were saying was, for example, if you have Candida, that you want to take Saccharomyces boulardii because can you give me the reason? Can you say what you told me?
Absolutely. So again, trying to shift people's paradigm just a little bit. I do use antimicrobials sometimes, okay? But I'm a little cautious about when I use them because if someone already has a low diversity, it's not going to help them to give them antimicrobials, even if they're natural, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So if you have Candida and you just are like, what are the antifungals? How can I take all these antifungals, which most people are at? Well, I hate to tell you that doesn't always work. What you should do, in my opinion, and again, supported by research, is you want to put competing species with it. So Saccharomyces boulardii is also a fungus, but it's a very beneficial fungus. It just does a lot of good things for us, and it will compete with Candida. So think about your gut as real estate, okay? Like you have a neighborhood, and let's say Candida took over that neighborhood. Well, if I bring in Saccharomyces boulardii and it's like, I'm going to start taking that spot and I'm going to take that spot and well, then the Candida has to get out. It doesn't have space anymore. So that when I talk about competing microbes, this is what we're talking about. Right. So, I mean, just for instance, there's even some spores in microbiome labs, Megaspore, like Bacillus clausii that competes with C. diff. So if you have C. diff, it will compete with that and push it out. So we want to think more about restoring the microbiome and not in the sense of, can we just keep giving this person the killers to the bad guy? Because sorry, that just doesn't always work. It really doesn't.
And it doesn't
you have to put in
for it. Just like you were talking about the broad spectrum, it's the same thing. It's just a natural agent.
Yes.
So it's killing sort of everything. So I like the idea that we don't have to kill off everything, but we want tons of variety. And we want a lot of representation of the good guys, because just like in a forest, there's going to be a couple of weeds, but it's not detrimental to the forest. The forest is not dying because there's a couple of weeds, right? Is that the same kind of concept?
No, you totally get it. Yes. Yeah. It's like, exactly. It can thrive with, when people say Candida is bad, I'm like, no, we all have Candida. It's when it gets overgrown that it's bad. We all have C. diff too. It's when it gets overgrown that it's bad. We all have E. coli. It's when it gets overgrown that it's bad. So we got to stop thinking about these are the bad guys, because I know I say that sometimes, but it really is about the level of them, the balance. Have they become a dictator? That's what I say, right? Have they become a disruptor where C. diff now is so large that it's disrupting your other microbes? It's not playing nice anymore, you know? So I think we have to rethink microbiome like that, because again, we've been in this world of heavy antibiotics, heavy go after the bad guy, kill him. But like people keep ending up with the same infections. Why? Because we're not restoring the microbiome. We're not restoring the ecosystem.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. So we haven't talked yet about any solutions, and I know obviously they're going to be very specific to what people have going on, especially, depending on their overgrowths and things like that. But is there any general advice that you can give us? How do we start thinking about restoring gut health, doing things to best practices, if you will, like you were talking about, don't eat late at night. That's a really good recommendation. So things along these lines.
I can give people... I'll give you guys like 5 best practices just to restore microbiome. And like you said, it is specific based on like your test and what I see. I like to kind of do more individualized protocols, but let's just do basic what would help everyone. Sure. Number 1, I would say time restricted eating, right? That has been shown to increase diversity of microbiome by up to like 60%. It's like insane. It does so many benefits for the actual microbiome. So time restricted eating, pick an 8 to 10 hour window. I even think a 10-hour window is fine for females. Truly. I really do. I don't think you have to go 8.
Yeah.
There's been shown benefits for the microbiome at 10 hours of an eating window, just so you guys know. Yeah. So I'd say do an compressed eating window.
Don't be snacking between that, right? So eat
exactly
at mealtime if you can. Yes.
Yeah, if you can. Like I would say even just compressing to an 8-hour window, though, you're going to do better than if you were in a 16-hour window before, 100%. That would be my first recommendation. Second would be stop using antibacterial stuff. Stop using antibacterial soap. Stop using antibacterial cleaners. When it says it's killing 99% of bacteria, it's 99% of good bacteria. It usually leaves pathogenic bacteria. Like it's the funniest, weirdest thing that you discover, but like, just don't think about, we're surrounded by bacteria, guys. Nothing is nothing is like sterile. Like if you think something's sterile, you're totally wrong. There's bacteria everywhere. Okay. Hate to break it to you, but that's true. But I'm just saying, so if we're trying to kill all the microbiome, like kill the bacteria, like that's killing good bacteria. So like don't use antibacterial soap. Don't use hand sanitizer. Those definitely kill. Please avoid glyphosate, like with your life. Like glyphosate is literally a selective antibiotic where it only kills good bacteria. No joke. Glyphosate is really bad for your microbiome. And if people don't know what I'm talking about with glyphosate, I'm talking about Roundup. So all the things that are sprayed with glyphosate, mostly grains, wheat, corn, soy, wheat chickpeas. In general, I avoid that. Mm-hmm. So really avoiding glyphosate, I would say, would be huge.
Getting
and making sure you buy exactly organic berries. I never get non-organic berries. They're heavily sprayed. So I'd say pesticides, herbicides in general, being real careful about that stuff because they are designed to kill bugs. They are designed to kill our bugs. Like it's the same stuff, like literally. So I would say avoid, antibiotics in general, or sorry, like antibiotics, herbicides, and pesticides are huge. Another thing that's super easy to do, nature. It literally has been shown to get outside. You increase your microbiome diversity because you're interacting with the dirt that has microbes and the leaves that have microbes and the grass that have microbes and the spores. And so just getting outside has been shown to do wonders for our microbiome. Even the sunshine affects our skin microbiome. It protects us. It kills viruses. Like it's just an easy one that most of us like. I mean, me and you do it because we're prescriptive about it, right? Yeah. But I'm getting outside every day, no matter what, you know? But most people, they're indoors all day, every day, you know? So I'd say time restricted eating, get outside, avoid antibiotics and pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, right? And then honestly, being around animals is really good for microbiome. So I know you have cats, I have a dog, like being around animals, it's been shown that people that are raised around farm animals have far less allergies, far less. It's crazy. So being around animals, like don't be afraid to get dirty, like garden, get your like hands in dirt. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to get dirty. I'd also say this like a random one, but if you're planning on having children, I would try to have a natural birth versus a C-section because that will really affect their microbiome. And also breastfeed versus bottle feed is huge for your child. You will set them up for a far better life. Trust me. And then I would say the last one would be, I'm going to say two last ones. Fiber intake is important, but also like the right type of fibers. So I really like more like resistant starch is a really, really good fiber for really good bacteria. So when I say resistant starch, I'm saying like cooking and cooling potatoes, right? If you cook and cool potatoes, they form resistant starch, which is like a fiber that these bacteria eat. And then actually, because they eat them and there's more fiber, it does affect your blood sugar less, you know? Yep. So I'd say if you've gotten your blood sugar under control and you can handle like sweet potatoes or regular potatoes, I would cook and cool them. So cool them for at least 20 minutes. So they develop resistant starch, but that can feed your good microbiome. Also, diversity of fibers in general. So try not to stick to the same just broccoli all the time. Try to do like leeks and then do like sauerkraut and then do green beans and then do onions. Onions and garlic have really good prebiotic fibers in them. People don't know that. Yeah. Whenever I say fiber, they don't think of like onions and garlic, but I'm like, no, there's like really good prebiotic fibers in those. So just diversify your fibers. That will bring a different amount of species. If you don't stick to the same, I would even say like switch up your fiber supplement too. Mm-hmm. Like if you always do psyllium husk, try acacia fiber, try apple pectin fiber, like do different fibers because they feed different bacteria. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really great. I saw this recommendation came from Chris Kresser, who I believe got it from somebody else. But I saw this and it just blew my mind at the simplicity, but like how I feel that this would be so effective. So he recommended to basically cook about 20 to 30 different types of vegetables and you puree it all. And then you have some that you put a lot of it in the freezer, but have some that you thaw and eat just a couple of spoonfuls a day to give your body all different types of different fibers, but you do it in a small, like graduating dose. So it gets more and more. And I think that this would be a really good idea for someone who, let's say, has done carnivore for a really long time or not eating so many vegetables, that it will inoculate your gut in small doses with a bunch of different variety of different fibers from different vegetables. And I was like, ooh, I think I want to do that because, I think we can all increase our variety of food a little bit more. How often are we going to the grocery store getting like the same kind of stuff, over and over? And even
I'm guilty.
Yeah. We just cook what's easy, so I think that that's going to be my next endeavor is to try to make like a big mix of a bunch of different vegetables. So leeks, and throw in the leeks and the garlic and the onion. And then just, Jenny, do you see that some people are not able to tolerate these prebiotic foods? And if so, what type of people sort of maybe fall under this umbrella of having difficulty tolerating things?
Yeah, this is a good question. So people that have SIBO, they don't tolerate prebiotic fibers well. So if you notice that you eat fiber and then you get like really bloated, I would say that's an indicator that you need to back off for a little bit and maybe treat the SIBO. but also like I always say with fiber, go low and slow, right? So like you want little amounts and then you increase it like gradually, right? That's important because especially if you've been like carnivore and you've kind of lost the ability to break down these fibers, you have to like regain that ability to break them down. It's almost like training your gut again, to be honest. So with that being said, I would say anyone, you should go low and slow, right? With fiber. Like you hear 25 grams a day. Yeah, but you shouldn't start there. You know what I mean? Like don't just start some people like hear about fiber and then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so bloated all day. I'm like, dude, start with like 10 grams and then they go up to 15 grams and then like go 20 grams, like just go slowly, right? Because it needs to be gradual. Otherwise you will experience a lot of bloating, right?
Yeah.
I do want to say though, don't think that just because you get bloating, it's horrible for you, because that's not the case. You know what I mean? Even with cases of SIBO, I still think small amounts of fiber can be tolerated, but you just have to use a really good gauge about like, are you getting bloated? You know? So for instance, like, it's like I said, it's kind of a hard answer because you have to like, okay, for instance, if we're talking about SIBO, most people know about the FODMAP. So they're like fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, polysaccharides. There's certain fibers that are not super well tolerated with people with SIBO. Okay. So I would say you can look that up. I have it also, like if you guys need it, but you can look up low FODMAP vegetables, and I would start with low FODMAP vegetables. So there's certain vegetables that are higher in these FODMAPs, like cruciferous vegetables. So if you notice that you eat broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts and you get super bloated, that means you're probably not digesting those ones well, which could indicate that maybe you just haven't introduced them for one, or maybe it's SIBO. But I don't want people to always like go towards, oh, I have SIBO. It's like, maybe you just weren't eating a lot of fiber for a really long time and your body kind of lost the capacity to break it down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you've gone keto, like I noticed that personally. When I went keto, I was like too low fiber, I'll be honest. And then once I brought fiber back, I would notice sometimes I'd get really bloated, and I had to build back up that tolerance for cruciferous vegetables and stuff like that. So I do think like going slow, going low, paying attention. But like I would say, if you notice that certain vegetables or any fibers make you bloated, I would probably look at the low FODMAP and maybe choose wisely. But just understand you can build yourself back up there. I would love to see people build themselves back up to 25 grams a day of fiber. I think that's where we thrive, but you won't be able to start there. I just want to tell people that again. Don't start there, as even with fermented foods too. If you never eat fermented foods and then you decide to eat like 6 ounces of sauerkraut in one night, like you might not be feeling so hot, you know, you're going to have some gas. Yeah. So anyway, that would be my suggestion.
Those are really great tips. And I love that you give that starting point for a lot of people, because we have to customize this to us, because we're all starting from different points. You know, some of us have had millions of rounds of antibiotics or been off of fiber for so long, and you know, working slowly so you can get your gut microbiome used to digesting these foods, because we may have lost the species that digest them. So that's why you're recommending low and slow. Like just give little bits. It might be a little bloated at first, but as long as it's not like, oh, I look 9 months pregnant, that lower the amount and then just be consistent over time and increasing this. Same thing with sauerkraut. Like start with just a little, like a half a teaspoon of the juice. If anything, that's what Chris Kresser recommended. And then to a teaspoon of the juice, and then a little bit of the vegetable, and then like one bite. So we're talking about tiny, tiny amounts and just increasing it more and more. And and then what would you say about any other fermented foods besides, and like fermented foods, people are like, oh, heal your gut, eat fermented foods. It like doesn't always work like that, right? Like it's that's not going to heal your gut. But can you talk to us a little bit more about fermented foods and where they fit in?
Yes. Yeah. And I like you brought this up, because I'm going to probably burst some people's bubble with this, and I'm sorry, but I will say if you have high histamine, you don't always do well with fermented foods. So and I'll explain how you have high histamine, what can be the case. But if you have high histamine, so let's say you take the test, I can see if you have high histamine. Foods that have been known to raise histamine are fermented foods, right? So any obviously alcoholic beverages, but even sauerkraut, even bone broth actually has been shown to raise histamine. Mm-hmm. So I think you got to be a little cautious.
Yeah, if you have
exactly. Or it's like, so I'm not saying it's a hard answer, because fermented foods are highly beneficial for a lot of people. But I would say, how do you know if you have high histamine? Either you've done a test or you have a lot of skin issues and allergies. That's kind of a sign that you have high histamine. Histamine is caused elevated from, can be from leaky gut, right? It can also be from a genetic component that you're missing the DAO enzyme. So it's like, I think you gotta, again, I'm always big on developing this relationship with your body where you understand how food impacts you. I think a lot of people are missing that piece. It's like almost like a meditation piece, right? Like if I eat this food, how do I feel afterwards? If you eat sauerkraut and you feel really shitty, maybe you do have really high histamine and it's not going well with you right now. It doesn't mean you always have to avoid it, but maybe you got to get that histamine down and then you can incorporate it. So, I would say in general, one thing I do want to clear up is a lot of people are so big on kombucha. I'm not huge on kombucha. I'll be honest. Like if I think of fermented food, I'm thinking sauerkraut. Like that's where I'm going. Kombucha can be high sugar. They can have added sugar to it. Yeah. You're getting some bacteria and species, but it's like, I don't know. Anyway, I think it's kind of hyped. That's all I'm saying. I think it's a little hyped. I
agree.
And I do think if you have like candida, it's not going to help you either. So
yeah, I think that, make it at home, find one that's store-bought that has really low sugar. There are a couple of brands that do this, and having it as like a couple of sips, not like, oh, I'm going to go drink a bottle of kombucha. I don't think it's not the best place to get your probiotics from, and it usually does come with a ton of excess sugar, which is not going to be good on your blood sugar. So I'm in agreement there too. Yeah.
And one thing I just want to say with probiotics, because someone asked me this question the other day, and I was like, this is a really good question. People ask, are probiotics good for you? Okay. This is like such an answer. And my answer to that is, it depends. It depends on what species, right? So to me, that's almost like asking, is food good for you? It depends. What kind of food? Like, well, you know what I'm saying? Like if I ask you that, Danielle, is food good for you or is it not good for you? It's like, it depends on what kind of food.
It's not, right?
Exactly. So I think we need to start thinking of probiotics the same way, because I'll be honest, there's a lot of shitty probiotics out there, a lot, for so many reasons that I feel like they're just kind of the kitchen sink of different species. Like, oh, well, let's throw these species in there. Guys, not every species is beneficial. I'm just going to say that. There's some strains that are anti-inflammatory. There's some strains that are inflammatory. So I would say know your species. And if you don't know, well, then go to someone that does know. Like I study species, right? There's a reason if I do a probiotic supplement, I want to see the research behind it. Why did they choose that? This is the reason I work with Microbiome Labs too, is because I know they have particularly chosen these 5 different spores that have very specific jobs that do very specific things, right? And they have 14 published research papers on it. So when people ask me like, how do you feel about this probiotic at Sprouts? I'm like, it's probably not good. Like that's my initial response, is because it's probably dead. It's probably heat sensitive and it died on the way here. It probably doesn't actually can make it through your stomach acid to actually do something. So I would just want to caution people to say like, not all probiotics are created equal at all.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, are probiotics good for you or not? That is my answer. That's literally like asking me, are supplements good for you? Are food good for you? Which ones? Yeah. It depends, it's like, I'm just sick of that question that people don't get
It's a great answer though. I personally love Megaspore, and I get this little patch of kind of like a dry skin eczema thing if I wash my hands too much. I got it at the beginning of COVID. I used to get it when I used to work in a florist, and my hands were always wet from the flowers, and nothing gets rid of it until I take Megaspore. So I ran out of Megaspore. It came back and I was like, oh man, this is so annoying. So I started taking Megaspore again. It's almost completely gone.
Shut up.
Every single day I watch my finger heal and get better. The spot gets smaller and smaller and heal and heal. It's like watching my gut heal on the outside of my body. I love it. I think it's so cool. And if anyone is wanting to look into Megaspore, I do have it available on my FullScript account, so I can link that in the show notes. But I recommend, because just like you were talking about low and slow, same thing with Megaspore. This thing is strong.
Powerful. It's strong.
Yes. I had to start with like 1/8 of a capsule. So I had to open that up. Like it says, take 1 capsule every other day for the first week. I could not do that. So you have to gently work your way up. And so always, do your own research and make sure you're careful. And I'm not telling you to take a supplement, just educational purposes only. But it's something that like Jennilyn said, it is very research backed, and so that you can look into these studies of why it's so beneficial and why it's so great. And then rotating probiotics can be really helpful too, because we don't want to like take Megaspore always and forever, because then maybe we're only growing up these 5 species and we might want a little bit of variety in there. So the fermented foods, different types of fibers, and potentially rotating. Would you agree with that, with the rotating the probiotics?
Yes and no. Okay. So normally I would definitely agree with most strains to rotate them. The difference is with spores though, is that spores they work kind of different. They raise a lot of different species and they correct a lot of different ecosystems. Oh, cool. So I actually would recommend that people could stay on Megaspore indefinitely.
That's good to know, because I feel like I do.
But other ones, not so much. Like if you're taking a lactobacillus, you should rotate that. If you're taking bifidobacterium, you should rotate that. Yes, most of them you are right that you should rotate.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's awesome. So I feel we've gone so long. I have to make this a 2-part episode. This is such great information. So Jennilyn, where can people find you if they want to work with you, test their gut, if they want this test and they want to be on their way to healing their leaky gut, their SIBO, balancing out their gut bacteria? Where can we find you and work with you?
Yeah, you can find me in a number of places. So I'm active on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Jennilyn Fit. So it's just JENNILYNFIT. So you guys can contact me there. I also, I have my main place that I'm honestly active on right now is Facebook and my group. So I have a Facebook group that's particularly just for gut health. If you search, it's called 2 Jenny's Gut Health. It's actually my business partner's named Jenny as well. So anyway, 2 Jenny's Gut Health. If you find that's the easiest way to get in touch with me about this stuff, I would say I prefer that over like Instagram and stuff, just because like that's where I deal with just gut health all day. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you want to get in that group, it's a private group, but you can request to join. We'll approve you. And then we really post a lot. I go live in there once a week to answer questions. So like you get a lot of interaction with me there. And then you also order the test through I would say just get in the group, because we have the links to the test. We have links. And then just so people know, if they want to do the test, I offer a complimentary consultation with it. So I will go over the test with you. It's 20 pages of information. You probably won't understand it, to be honest. So I do need to go over it with you, explain stuff, and then I can give you a protocol based on your test. So I'd say the easiest way is just go on Facebook, and you can either search Jennilyn Griffiths. But like I said, my group is called 2 Jenny's Gut Health Support, and that's the best way to go.
Okay, cool. I'll link everything in the show notes so people can find you easily. And thank you so much
for
taking the extra time to chat with us today. I feel like we could,
I know. We could talk for 7 hours. I know.
I felt like this is a conversation. I know, yeah. Well, we'll definitely have part 2, so we'll do a part 3 sometime for sure. But
yes, I would love that.
I appreciate all your helpful information, and I hope this has people really interested in the gut and looking at things a different way. I love your more balanced approach, that we're not going to go in and kill everything. We already know that germ theory is not really right, so we want to get our balance right, and I think that's it connects to all of health. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
You are so welcome. Okay. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.